Have you ever wondered how life can change in the blink of an eye? What if I told you that a simple offer of help could transform two lives in unexpected ways? Get ready for a moving story of redemption and surprise. But before you start, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. The setting sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floors of Marcus Reynolds' corner office, situated high above the bustling streets of Los Angeles. The city sprawled beneath him like a glittering carpet, but Marcus barely noticed the view anymore. At 45, he had achieved everything society deemed important: wealth, power, and an empire built from ruthless determination. Yet as he stood there, watching the city transition from day to night, an unfamiliar emptiness gnawed at his core. The board meeting earlier that day had left a bitter taste in his mouth. Another hostile takeover, another company dismantled for profit. The faces of soon-to-be unemployed workers flashed through his mind, but he pushed the thoughts away with practiced ease. Business was business, after all. His Italian leather shoes clicked against the floor as he gathered his belongings, ready to retreat to his hillside mansion where solitude awaited him like an old friend. The October air carried an unusual chill as Marcus made his way to his Bentley in the underground parking garage. The engine purred to life, a sound that usually brought him satisfaction, but tonight felt hollow. As he navigated through downtown Los Angeles, the traffic grew increasingly dense, a consequence of an accident ahead. His fingers drummed impatiently against the steering wheel, each minute of delay feeding his growing irritation. Then it happened. A sputtering sound followed by an alarming series of clicks. The Bentley's dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree before the engine died completely. Marcus managed to guide the car to the curb, finding himself stranded in a neighborhood he wouldn't normally be caught dead in. The irony of his situation wasn't lost on him. A millionaire stuck in one of the city's more modest districts, surrounded by small businesses and worn apartment buildings. He reached for his phone, dialing his preferred luxury car service. The response was frustrating. Due to the accident and resulting traffic, it would be at least 2 hours before they could reach him. Marcus felt his blood pressure rising, his perfectly planned evening crumbling around him. That's when he heard a gentle tap on his window. Startled, he turned to see a woman in her early 40s, her dark skin glowing warmly in the streetlight, wearing a simple apron over practical clothing. Her expression held genuine concern, devoid of the usual recognition or fawning he was accustomed to receiving. "Everything all right?" she asked as he reluctantly lowered his window. "I noticed you've been sitting here for a while, and that engine sound didn't sound too healthy." Marcus studied her face, searching for ulterior motives, but finding none. "I'm fine," he replied curtly. "I have assistance on the way." The woman, who introduced herself as Angela Johnson, smiled knowingly. "With that pile up on Main Street? You might be waiting a while." She gestured to a modest establishment across the street, its windows warm and inviting. "I own that diner right there. Why don't you wait inside? It's getting chilly out here, and I make a mean cup of coffee." Marcus's first instinct was to decline. He had made it this far in life by keeping people at arm's length, by never accepting help that might later be held over his head. But as another cold breeze cut through his expensive suit, and the reality of his 2-hour wait sank in, he found himself reconsidering. "It's just coffee," Angela added, as if reading his thoughts. No strings attached. Something in her voice, its genuine warmth, perhaps, or its complete lack of pretense, made Marcus reach for his door handle. As he stepped out of his car, the contrast between them couldn't have been more stark. His tailored suit against her practical work clothes, his polished shoes against her comfortable sneakers. Yet Angela's presence carried a dignity that had nothing to do with material wealth. The bell above the diner's door chimed as they entered Johnson's family diner. The interior was clean but modest, with well-worn booths and the comforting aroma of home-style cooking filling the air. A few patrons looked up briefly before returning to their meals, showing none of the recognition Marcus was used to receiving. Angela guided him to a booth near the window where he could keep an eye on his car. The vinyl seat squeaked beneath him, a sound so foreign to his world of leather and luxury that it almost made him smile. "Almost. Regular or decaf?" Angela asked, already reaching for a clean mug. "Regular black," Marcus replied, trying to mask his discomfort with authority. As Angela moved behind the counter, Marcus observed her interactions with other customers. She knew most by name, asking about their families or jobs with genuine interest. A young mother struggled to quiet her fussy toddler while trying to eat. Angela smoothly produced a handful of crayons and a paper placemat, transforming it into an impromptu coloring station. An elderly man at the counter received his usual order without having to speak a word. It was a dance Marcus had never witnessed in the high-end restaurants he frequented. This authentic connection between people, this sense of community that had nothing to do with status or wealth. Angela moved through her domain with grace and purpose, her actions guided by something deeper than profit margins and quarterly reports. When she returned with his coffee, the ceramic mug was slightly chipped but impeccably clean. The coffee itself surprised him. Rich and flavorful, far better than he expected. Angela smiled at his poorly concealed reaction but didn't comment on it. "First time in this neighborhood?" she asked, sliding into the seat across from him. The action was so unexpected that Marcus nearly spilled his coffee. "Is it that obvious?" he replied, his tone sharper than intended. Angela's laugh was warm and genuine. "Let's just say you don't exactly blend in. But that's okay. Everyone's welcome here." Thunder rumbled in the distance, and rain began to patter against the windows. Marcus watched as Angela rose to distribute menus to a new group of customers seeking shelter from the approaching storm. Despite his initial resistance, he found himself studying her with growing curiosity. Here was someone who seemed genuinely content with a life he would have considered beneath him. Yet her smile held more authenticity than any he'd seen in his board meetings or charity galas. The rain intensified, transforming the street outside into a glistening mirror of neon signs and headlights. Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from the car service. The wait time had increased to 3 hours due to the weather. He should have felt angry, should have demanded priority service, but something kept him from his usual reactions. Perhaps it was the coffee, or the hypnotic sound of rain against glass, or maybe it was the peculiar peace that seemed to permeate this humble establishment. As the evening wore on, Marcus Reynolds, the man who prided himself on needing no one, found himself in the unfamiliar position of being grateful for a stranger's kindness. And though he didn't realize it yet, this rainy evening in a modest diner would mark the beginning of a profound change in his life. The following morning, Marcus found himself unable to focus on the quarterly reports spread across his mahogany desk. The numbers blurred before his eyes as his thoughts kept drifting back to Johnson's family diner. The memory of that simple ceramic coffee mug felt more real than the fine bone china that now held his premium roasted blend. He pushed away from his desk, surprising himself with a decision that seemed to come from somewhere beyond his usual calculated thinking. Within an hour, his Bentley, now repaired, was pulling up to the curb outside the diner. The morning light revealed details he'd missed in the previous evening's storm. Faded awnings that had once been forest green, window boxes holding surprisingly vibrant marigolds, and a hand-painted sign advertising Daily Special, made with love. In the harsh daylight, he expected to feel embarrassed about returning to such a modest establishment, but instead found himself drawn to its unpretentious authenticity. The same bell chimed as he entered, and the breakfast rush was in full swing. Angela moved efficiently between tables, her purple apron now dusted with flour, her quick movements orchestrating a ballet of coffee pots and plates. She spotted him and did a double take, her surprise evident but not unwelcoming. "Well, look who's back," she called out, gesturing to an empty spot at the counter. "Your car must be running better than yesterday." Marcus settled onto a chrome and vinyl stool, feeling strangely comfortable in his three-piece suit amid the working-class breakfast crowd. "It is," he replied, watching as she poured him coffee without asking. "I came to settle my bill from last night." Angela's laugh carried over the sizzle of the grill and the murmur of conversation. "Honey, that coffee was on the house. Anyone stuck in the rain deserves at least that much kindness." The concept of receiving something for free, something offered without expectation of return, struck Marcus as both foreign and fascinating. In his world, every gesture came with strings attached, Every kindness was a calculated move in a complex game of power and influence. He reached for his wallet, extracted a $100 bill, and placed it on the counter. "Please," he insisted, "take it." Angela looked at the money, then at him, her expression softening with understanding. "Tell you what," she said, sliding the bill back towards him. "Instead of paying for yesterday's coffee, why don't you buy breakfast for that young couple over there?" She nodded toward a pair of college students huddled over a single plate of eggs, obviously sharing to save money. Marcus followed her gaze, something shifting in his chest. Without a word, he nodded, and Angela's smile grew warmer. She moved to the students' table, whispered something that made their eyes widen with joy, then returned to refill Marcus's cup. "Why do you do this?" he found himself asking, gesturing to the diner around them. "You could probably run a much more profitable establishment in a better location." Angela leaned against the counter, her eyes taking in the morning crowd. Construction workers grabbing coffee before their shift, elderly regulars solving crossword puzzles, students typing on laptops while nursing endless cups of coffee. Profit isn't everything, Mr. Reynolds. These people? They're family, not by blood, but by choice. Every morning, I get to make their days a little better, their burdens a little lighter. What could be more profitable than that? The simplicity and depth of her answer struck him silent. He watched as she moved away to greet new customers, her presence bringing smiles to tired faces. The morning light streamed through the windows, catching dust motes and golden beams, and Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a desire to understand, to learn from someone who measured wealth in ways he'd never considered. Days began to follow a new pattern. Marcus found himself making detours to the diner, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for a meal, but always for the growing sense of peace he found within its walls. He learned the names of regular customers. Tom, the construction foreman who always saved half his breakfast for a stray cat. Maria, the nursing student working double shifts to pay for school. Old Mr. Chun, who taught chess to neighborhood kids every Sunday afternoon. And Jelon never pressed him for personal information, never treated him differently despite obviously knowing who he was. A quick Google search would have told her everything about Marcus Reynolds, the ruthless business magnate. Instead, she simply included him in the daily life of her diner, as if he were any other customer seeking coffee and conversation. One particularly busy morning, when her usual waitress called in sick, Marcus surprised himself, and Angela, by offering to help. He removed his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and spent 2 hours delivering plates and refilling coffee cups. His first attempts were clumsy, earning good-natured teasing from the regulars. But by the end of the rush, he had found a rhythm. More importantly, he had discovered something he'd forgotten existed: the simple satisfaction of helping others without agenda or expectation. As weeks passed, subtle changes began to manifest in Marcus's life. His executive assistant noticed he no longer demanded immediate responses to emails marked urgent. Board members commented on his increased patience during meetings. He found himself considering the human cost of his business decisions, something that would have seemed laughably sentimental just months before. But it was during a late afternoon at the diner, watching Angela coach a young employee through his first day on the job, that Marcus had his most profound realization. Success, as he had defined it for so many years, was a hollow achievement compared to the wealth of human connection he witnessed daily in this humble establishment. Angela's influence had begun to reshape his understanding of value, worth, and purpose. The transformation wasn't dramatic or sudden. It came in small moments, like the morning he helped an elderly customer to her car in the rain, or the day he sat for an hour listening to a veteran's stories about his grandchildren. Each interaction, each small act of kindness, felt like another crack in the fortress of isolation he had built around himself. One evening, as the diner was closing and Angela was wiping down the counter, she caught him staring thoughtfully out the window. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, tossing the cleaning rag over her shoulder. Marcus turned to her, his expression unusually vulnerable. "I've been thinking about legacy," he said slowly, "about what we leave behind. You've built something remarkable here, Angela. Not just a business. You've created a community. I've spent my life building empires of steel and glass. But you You've built something alive." Angela's response was interrupted by a knock at the door. One of her regular customers, an elderly woman, looking distressed. Despite the closed sign, Angela immediately went to let her in. The woman's electricity had been cut off, and she didn't know where to turn. Without hesitation, Angela began making arrangements to help, pulling out her own wallet despite the diner's modest profits. Marcus watched this interaction with growing clarity. He had the resources to make a real difference in this community, not through grand gestures or public donations, but through careful, considerate action guided by Angela's intimate knowledge of her neighbor's needs. The realization felt like waking from a long sleep. He had been given an opportunity to redefine his purpose, to transform his success into something meaningful. The diner's neon sign cast a warm glow through the gathering dusk, and Marcus Reynolds, the man who once measured life in profit margins and market shares, felt the last walls of his old self beginning to crumble. In their place, something new was taking root, something that promised a different kind of wealth, a different measure of success, and a path to redemption he never knew he was seeking. That realization became the catalyst for a series of quiet but significant changes in Marcus's life. The following morning, rather than heading straight to his office, he spent several hours walking through Angela's neighborhood, seeing it with new eyes. The streets that had once seemed shabby to him now told stories of lives being lived, of communities supporting each other despite limited resources. He passed small businesses struggling to compete with corporate chains, community centers operating on shoestring budgets, and schools in desperate need of renovation. Each corner revealed both challenges and possibilities. Children played basketball with a bent rim on a cracked court, their laughter undimmed by their surroundings. Elderly residents tended to small garden patches in whatever space they could find, creating pockets of beauty amid the urban landscape. When Marcus returned to the diner, he carried with him a vision that had been forming since the previous night. He found Angela in her usual spot behind the counter, but instead of taking his regular seat, he asked if they could talk privately. In the small office at the back of the diner, surrounded by boxes of supplies and handwritten invoices, Marcus shared his idea. "I want to help," he began, then quickly raised a hand as Angela started to protest. "Not with a handout or a grand gesture. I want to invest in this community, but I need your guidance to do it right. You know these people, their real needs, their dreams. I have resources that could make a difference, but you have something more valuable: trust and understanding." Angela studied him for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "Why now, Marcus? What changed?" The question made him pause, considering carefully. "Yesterday, watching you with Mrs. Thompson and her electricity problem, it made me realize something. I've spent my life accumulating wealth, but you've spent yours accumulating something far more valuable: genuine connections with people. I want to learn from you, to use what I have in ways that actually matter." Over the next few weeks, Marcus and Angela began working together, though few knew about their collaboration. They started small: anonymous donations to help families facing eviction, quiet investments in local businesses struggling to stay afloat, scholarships for promising students who couldn't afford college application fees. Marcus insisted on keeping his involvement secret, understanding that his reputation as a ruthless businessman might cause resistance. The changes in the neighborhood were subtle at first. The basketball court was mysteriously repaired one weekend, complete with new hoops and fresh paint. The community center received an anonymous donation for after-school programs. Small business owners found themselves approved for loans they desperately needed, with surprisingly favorable terms. Marcus discovered a new kind of satisfaction in this work. Each morning, he would stop by the diner for coffee and updates from Angela about the community's needs and successes. He learned to listen more than speak, to understand that sometimes the smallest interventions could have the most significant impact. A replaced washing machine for a single mother who had been spending precious time and money at the laundromat. A new delivery van for the local food bank. Resources for ESL classes at the community center. One morning, as Marcus sat at his usual spot at the counter, he overheard two elderly regulars discussing the recent changes in the neighborhood. Their voices were filled with hope and wonder at the mysterious benefactor who seemed to understand exactly what the community needed. Angela caught his eye and smiled knowingly, but said nothing. The transformation wasn't just happening in the neighborhood. It was happening within Marcus himself. Board meetings that had once focused solely on profit margins now included discussions about community impact. His company began implementing policies that considered the human cost of business decisions. When a struggling local company came up for acquisition, instead of dismantling it for assets, Marcus found ways to preserve jobs and strengthen its community presence. His executive team noticed the changes but said little, though some whispered about whether their ruthless leader had gone soft. Marcus didn't care. For the first time in his life, he was measuring success by something other than numbers on a spreadsheet. The diner became more than just a place for coffee. It became his anchor, a daily reminder of what really mattered. He watched Angela's interaction with her customers with growing admiration, noting how she remembered not just their usual orders but their stories, their struggles, their triumphs. She celebrated their children's achievements, consoled them through losses, and offered support that went far beyond the food she served. One rainy evening, similar to the one that had first brought him to the diner, Marcus arrived just as Angela was closing up. She looked tired but satisfied, as she always did after a long day of serving her community. Without asking, he began helping her with the closing routine he'd come to know well, wiping down tables, stacking chairs, counting the day's receipts. "You know," Angela said, as they worked side by side, "when you first walked in here that night, I never would have guessed we'd end up here." Marcus paused in his task, looking around the diner that had become more familiar to him than his own expensive restaurants. "Neither would I," he admitted. "I thought I knew everything about success, about what mattered in life. But watching you, learning from you, it's shown me how little I really knew." Angela leaned against the counter, her expression serious. "You've done so much for this community, Marcus. More than you probably realize. But do you know what the most important change has been?" He shook his head, curious. "It's not the money you've invested or the programs you've funded, though those have been incredible. It's that you've learned to see people as people, not as assets or liabilities. You've learned to care." The truth of her words struck him deeply. He thought about how different he was from the man who had first broken down outside this diner. That Marcus Reynolds would never have imagined himself spending evenings helping to close a modest diner, or weekends mentoring young entrepreneurs from the neighborhood, or using his business acumen to support rather than exploit struggling communities. Through the diner's windows, he could see the street where his car had broken down that fateful night. The neighborhood was different now. Not gentrified or drastically changed, but strengthened, supported, given the resources to thrive while maintaining its character and community. And he was different too, transformed not by grand gestures or dramatic events, but by the simple, daily act of showing up, of caring, of learning to see the world through eyes that valued more than just profit. The neon sign flickered off, casting the diner in soft shadows, and Marcus realized that this place, this simple, humble diner, had given him something his wealth never could, a sense of belonging, of purpose, of genuine connection to the world around him. As he helped Angela gather her things and lock up for the night, he understood that true transformation often comes not from dramatic changes, but from small acts of kindness that ripple outward, touching lives in ways we might never fully comprehend. As Marcus walked Angela to her car that evening, the weight of his transformation settled around him like a comfortable embrace. The night air carried the scent of rain-washed streets and someone's home cooking, smells he would have once dismissed but now found comforting. They paused at the corner where their paths would diverge, but something made Marcus hesitate. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice carrying an unusual note of vulnerability. "I've been thinking about my family." Angela leaned against her car, giving him the space and attention she knew he needed. The streetlight cast a gentle glow over them, much like the night they'd first met. "I have a sister," he continued, the words coming slowly at first, then gathering momentum. "Sarah. We haven't spoken in 15 years. After our parents died, I pushed her away. I was so focused on building the business, on proving myself, that I treated her attempts to stay connected as interruptions. The last time we spoke, she told me I'd forgotten how to be human. Angela listened quietly, her presence encouraging without pushing. Around them, the neighborhood settled into its nighttime rhythm. Distant music, the occasional passing car, the sound of families settling in for the evening. She was right, Marcus admitted, his voice thick with emotion. I had forgotten. Or maybe I'd chosen to forget because it was easier than dealing with the pain of losing our parents. But being here, seeing how you've created this family of choice, it's made me realize what I've been missing. The next morning, instead of heading to the office, Marcus found himself driving to a modest suburb an hour outside the city. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he navigated streets he hadn't visited in over a decade. Sarah's house looked different from what he remembered. The garden was more extensive, flowers blooming in carefully tended beds, and children's toys scattered across the front lawn. He sat in his car for nearly 30 minutes, gathering courage. Finally, the front door opened, and Sarah stepped out, wearing gardening gloves and carrying a watering can. She stopped short when she saw him, recognition and surprise playing across her face. Their reunion was awkward at first, filled with long silences and careful words. But as Marcus shared his story about the broken-down car, the diner, and Angela's influence on his life, something began to thaw between them. Sarah's children, a boy and girl he'd never met, peered curiously at their long-lost uncle from behind their mother's legs. Over the following months, Marcus's transformation continued to deepen and expand. He began spending Sundays with Sarah's family, learning to be an uncle to her children, rediscovering the joy of family connections he'd forgotten existed. He brought them to the diner, where Angela welcomed them with her characteristic warmth, and watched as his newfound family became part of the larger community he'd come to cherish. His change didn't go unnoticed in the business world either. Magazines that had once praised his cutthroat business tactics now wrote articles about his company's innovative approach to community-focused development. Young entrepreneurs sought his advice, not just about making money, but about building businesses that contributed meaningfully to society. One particular project became especially close to his heart. Working with Angela, he established a mentorship program that paired successful business owners with promising young people from the neighborhood. The program operated out of a renovated building next to the diner, and Angela's cooking fueled late-night strategy sessions and weekend workshops. The diner itself evolved, though Angela insisted on keeping its essential character unchanged. The kitchen was upgraded, the dining room gently refreshed, but the heart of the place, its warmth, its welcome, its sense of community, remained steadfast. Marcus made sure the improvements never priced out the regular customers who had made the place what it was. On the one-year anniversary of his car breaking down outside the diner, Marcus organized a community celebration. The street was closed off, tables set up outside, and Angela's cooking supplemented by contributions from local families. As he watched children playing in the street and neighbors chatting over plates of food, Marcus felt a contentment he'd never known in all his years of accumulating wealth. Sarah appeared at his side, her children running off to join the games. You know, she said, bumping his shoulder gently with hers. This is what Mom and Dad always wanted for us. Not the success or the money, but this being part of something bigger than ourselves. Marcus nodded, emotion tightening his throat. Across the street, he caught sight of Angela talking with a group of elderly regulars, her laugh carrying over the music and chatter. She caught his eye and smiled, a smile that seemed to say she'd known all along what he could become. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down and the street was cleared, Marcus helped Angela close the diner one last time. The routine was familiar now, comforting in its simplicity. As they stood in the doorway, Angela turned to him with a thoughtful expression. You know what I've learned from all this? She asked, gesturing to encompass not just the diner, but the whole transformed neighborhood. What's that? That sometimes the biggest changes in our lives come from the smallest moments of kindness. One night, I saw someone stranded in the rain, and I offered them a cup of coffee. That's all it was. Just coffee and a little kindness. Marcus looked at her, this woman who had unknowingly changed the course of his life with that simple act of kindness. It was never just coffee, he said softly. You offer me a glimpse of a different way to live, a different way to measure success. You show me what real wealth looks like. As they locked up and said their goodnights, Marcus stood for a moment on the sidewalk, looking up at the stars barely visible through the city lights. His phone buzzed with messages from his sister about tomorrow's family dinner, mixed with emails about the mentorship program's latest success stories. The weight of his expensive watch felt different now, less like a symbol of status and more like a reminder of how precious time truly was and how important it was to spend it on things that truly mattered. The man who had once measured his worth in dollars and cents now found himself rich in ways his younger self could never have imagined. As he walked to his car, Marcus reflected that true transformation isn't about changing who you are entirely, but about rediscovering who you were meant to be all along. And sometimes, all it takes to start that journey is a broken-down car, a rainy night, and someone kind enough to offer a cup of coffee to a stranger. The city hummed around him, but for Marcus Reynolds, the most important sound was the echo of laughter and conversation from the evening celebration, a symphony of community and connection that had become the soundtrack of his new life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but he would face them as a changed man, one who had learned that the greatest wealth comes not from what we accumulate, but from what we give, and that the simplest acts of kindness can ripple outward in ways we never expect, transforming not just individual lives, but entire communities. As he drove home through the familiar streets, Marcus smiled, knowing that his transformation was not an ending, but a beginning, a continuous journey of growth, connection, and purpose that would continue to unfold in ways he couldn't yet imagine. And at the heart of it all was a simple diner, a warm smile, and a cup of coffee offered on a rainy night. That journey of growth continued to unfold in unexpected ways over the next several years. Marcus's transformation rippled outward, touching lives far beyond the small community where it all began. The lessons he learned at Johnson's Family Diner became the foundation for a new approach to business and life that would eventually inspire others to follow in his footsteps. 5 years after that fateful rainy night, the neighborhood had bloomed into something remarkable, not through gentrification or displacement, but through careful nurturing of its existing character and community. The mentorship program had grown into a full-fledged bee, using this incubator, helping local entrepreneurs start and grow their own businesses while maintaining their connections to the community. Former participants now served as mentors themselves, creating a self-sustaining cycle of growth and support. Angela's Diner remained the heart of it all, though it had evolved in its own way. The original space, now connected to a community center next door, where cooking classes taught by Angela herself helped young people learn both culinary skills and business basics. The diner's walls were covered with photographs documenting the community's transformation. Children who had grown into successful adults, small businesses that had flourished, families that had put down roots and prospered. Marcus's own evolution continued as well. He gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of his corporate empire, focusing instead on transforming it into a force for positive change. His company now specialized in community center development, working with neighborhoods rather than over them. The lessons learned from Angela's approach to community building became the foundation for a new business model that other companies began to emulate. One crisp autumn morning, as Marcus sat at his usual spot at the counter, he watched a scene that brought everything full circle. A sleek car broke down outside the diner, much like his had years ago. The driver, a young executive type in an expensive suit, looked as out of place as Marcus once had. Without hesitation, Angela's daughter Maya, now helping to run the diner, went out to offer assistance and a cup of coffee. Marcus caught Angela's eye, and they shared a knowing smile. They both recognized the echo of their own story in this moment, the potential for another transformation to begin. The young executive entered the diner with the same reluctance Marcus had shown years ago, but Maya's warmth, so like her mother's, began to work its magic almost immediately. Life had a way of coming full circle, Marcus reflected, but with new variations each time. His own story had spawned others, creating a tapestry of interconnected lives and shared experiences that continued to grow richer and more complex with each passing year. His phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, Their weekly family dinner would include a special celebration tonight. Her oldest child had just been accepted to college, planning to study community development with a focus on sustainable business practices. The career choice had been inspired, she said, by watching her uncle's work in the community. As Marcus read the message, he felt a profound sense of satisfaction. The changes in his life had not just transformed him. They had created a legacy that would continue through the next generation. His niece would take the lessons learned in this community and apply them in new ways, contributing to a growing movement of socially conscious business leaders. The diner had become more than just a restaurant or even a community hub. It was a living laboratory for social change, proving that success could be measured in human connections as well as profit margins. Business schools now sent students to study the Johnson's Diner model of community center development, and Angela had been invited to speak at conferences about the role of small businesses in community building. But perhaps the most significant change was the one least visible to outside observers. Marcus had found a peace he'd never known in his previous life of wealth and power. His relationships with Sarah and her family, with Angela and the diner community, with his employees and business partners, had depth and authenticity that no amount of money could buy. The young executive at the counter was now engaged in conversation with Maya, his initial stiffness beginning to melt away. Marcus remembered his own first cup of coffee in this diner, how it had tasted of something more than just expertly roasted beans. It had tasted of possibility, of change, of hope. As the morning light streamed through the windows, casting warm patterns on the well-worn counter, Marcus reflected on the strange and beautiful path that had led him here. He had learned that true wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts or property portfolios, but in the lives touched, the communities strengthened, and the connections forged between people. The diner's door chimed as new customers entered, bringing with them the energy and stories of another day in the life of this remarkable community. Marcus sat back, cradling his coffee cup, and watched as the magic of Johnson's Family Diner began to work on another soul in need of transformation. In the end, he realized we are all just travelers on our own journeys, sometimes needing nothing more than a cup of coffee and a kind word to help us find our way. And in that simple truth lay the greatest lesson of all, that the most profound changes often begin with the smallest acts of kindness, rippling outward in endless waves of possibility and hope. As the morning wore on and the diner filled with its usual mix of regulars and newcomers, Marcus smiled, knowing that somewhere in this city, in this moment, another story of transformation was beginning. And that perhaps was the most beautiful part of his journey, not just where it had led him, but how it continued to inspire others to find their own paths to meaningful change and authentic connection. The symphony of clinking cups, friendly conversation, and shared laughter filled the air, a reminder that the greatest symphonies in life are often composed of these simple, everyday moments of human connection. And at the heart of it all remained the truth that had changed Marcus's life. Sometimes the most valuable things in life come not from what we possess, but from what we give away: our time, our attention, our kindness, and our heart. That truth became even more evident as the years continued to unfold. A decade after Marcus's transformation began, Johnson's Family Diner had become more than just a local success story. It had evolved into a beacon of hope and a model for community transformation across the country. What started as a simple act of kindness on a rainy night had grown into a movement that was changing the way people thought about business, community, and success. Marcus, now in his early 60s, found himself spending more and more time mentoring others who wanted to replicate the magic that had transformed their neighborhood. He and Angela had developed a comprehensive program that taught not just the mechanics of community-centered business development, but the heart and soul of what made their approach work. The program, which they called Kindness Capital, had spread to cities across the country. Each new location started with a small business, usually a restaurant or cafe, that served as the heart of the community, just as Johnson's Diner had. These establishments became known as kindness centers, places where barriers between social classes dissolved and genuine human connections flourished. One particularly memorable morning, Marcus arrived at the diner to find Angela in tears, but they were tears of joy. She had just received a letter from a woman in Detroit who had implemented their model in her struggling neighborhood. The letter included photographs of transformed streets, thriving businesses, and most importantly, people coming together in ways they never had before. "You see this?" Angela said, pointing to a picture of children playing in a newly renovated community center. "This is what happens when we remember that business isn't just about making money. It's about making life better for each other." The diner itself had become a living museum of transformation. The walls were now covered with maps, showing the locations of kindness centers across the country, each one a point of light in what had once been struggling communities. Reg. Euler visitors included academics studying their model, journalists documenting their success, and business leaders seeking to understand how they could incorporate these principles into their own operations. But despite all the attention and success, the heart of the diner remained unchanged. Angela still served coffee with the same warm smile, still remembered everyone's names and stories, still created that indefinable atmosphere of welcome that had first caught Marcus's attention all those years ago. The only difference was that now she had help, not just from Maya, but from a team of young people who had grown up in the neighborhood and understood the importance of preserving its special character. Marcus's personal life had evolved as well. Sarah's children were now adults themselves, and his role as uncle had expanded to include great uncle to a new generation. Family dinners had grown to include not just his immediate family, but also members of the diner community who had become just as close as blood relatives. The boundaries between family, friends, and community had blurred into something rich and meaningful that defied traditional definitions. On the 15th anniversary of his breakdown outside the diner, Marcus decided to document their story. Not just his personal transformation, but the larger story of how one small business had sparked a nationwide movement. He set up a small recording studio in the diner's back room and began collecting stories from regular customers, from business owners who had benefited from their mentorship program, from community members who had watched their neighborhood transform. The stories were remarkable in their diversity, but united by a common thread: the power of human connection to transform lives. There was the story of James, a former corporate lawyer who had given up his practice to start a community bike shop that doubled as a youth mentoring program. Maria, the nursing student from years ago, had not only completed her degree, but had opened a community health clinic that operated on a sliding scale, ensuring that everyone in the neighborhood had access to quality health care. The project revealed something profound about the nature of transformation, how it moved in cycles, with each person becoming someone who helped others. The young executive whose car had broken down years after Marcus's had gone on to transform his own company's approach to community development. The children who had once played basketball on the repaired court were now running their own businesses and mentoring the next generation. One evening, as Marcus sat reviewing the collected stories, he found himself thinking about the true meaning of legacy. His former self had thought of legacy in terms of buildings with his name on them, of financial empires that would last generations. But now he understood that real legacy was something far more subtle and profound. It was the ripple effect of lives touched and transformed, of kindness passed forward, of communities strengthened and renewed. The diner had taught him that true wealth couldn't be measured in dollars and cents, but in the strength of human connections and the depth of community bonds. Every morning, as he watched Angela greet her customers with the same genuine warmth she had shown him on that rainy night, he was reminded that the simplest acts of kindness could set in motion changes that would affect generations to come. The impact of their work had begun to attract attention from unexpected quarters. Policymakers started studying their model as an alternative to traditional urban development approaches. Business schools incorporated their principles into their curricula. But perhaps most meaningfully, ordinary people in communities across the country began to realize that they too had the power to create positive change, one small act of kindness at a time. As Marcus sat at his usual spot at the counter, watching the evening paint the diner in warm hues, he reflected on how far they had come from that first rainy night. The diner buzzed with its usual evening activity: students studying, families sharing meals, community members discussing local projects. Every face had a story. Every conversation held the potential for new connections, new transformations. Angela joined him at the counter, sliding him a fresh cup of coffee with the same smile that had first welcomed him years ago. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their legacy unfold in the everyday miracle of community in action. The simple truth that had changed Marcus's life continued to change others, that the greatest transformations often begin with the smallest acts of kindness, and that true wealth lies not in what we accumulate, but in what we give away. The diner's neon sign cast its warm glow into the gathering dusk, a beacon of hope and possibility in a world that sometimes seemed to have forgotten the power of human connection. But within these walls, and in the growing network of kindness centers across the country, that power was very much alive and growing stronger every day. 20 years had passed since that fateful rainy night, and the kindness capital movement had evolved beyond anything Marcus or Angela could have imagined. What began in a humble diner had blossomed into an international phenomenon, with kindness centers now operating across continents, each adapting the core principles to their unique cultural contexts. On a crisp autumn morning, Marcus stood before an audience at the United Nations, sharing the story that had begun with a broken-down Bentley. The Global Summit on Sustainable Communities had invited him as their keynote speaker, recognizing the kindness capital model as a revolutionary approach to community development and social change. The greatest lesson we learned, Marcus told the assembled leaders, was that authentic transformation cannot be imposed from above. It must grow organically from within, nurtured by genuine human connections and sustained by community trust. The diner itself had become a pilgrimage site of sorts, with visitors from around the world coming to experience firsthand the magic that had sparked a global movement. Angela, now in her 70s but still possessing that same warm smile, had taken on a new role as the movement's spiritual guide, while Maya expertly managed the day-to-day operations. The neighborhood had flourished in ways that defied traditional metrics of success. Instead of luxury condos and chain stores, it boasted a vibrant ecosystem of locally owned businesses, community spaces, and cultural centers. The streets were alive with art, music, and the constant hum of human interaction. Children played safely under the watchful eyes of neighbors who knew their names, and elderly residents found purpose in mentoring younger generations. Sarah's grandchildren now worked summer jobs at the diner, learning the same lessons about community and connection that had transformed their great-uncle's life. The youngest, 16-year-old Emma, showed a particular aptitude for understanding the subtle dynamics that made the Kindness Center model work. One day, while helping Angela prepare for the morning rush, Emma made an observation that stopped Marcus in his tracks. "You know what's amazing?" she said, carefully arranging fresh flowers on the counter. "It's not just that you and Miss Angela changed how business works. You changed how people see themselves in relation to each other. Every person who walks through that door isn't just a customer. They're part of a story that's still being written." The wisdom in her words reminded Marcus of how the movement had evolved to address contemporary challenges. Kindness centers had become hubs for environmental sustainability, digital literacy, and cross-cultural understanding. They served as safe spaces where different generations could bridge the technological divide, where traditional wisdom could meet innovative solutions. The latest initiative, spearheaded by Maya, focused on using technology to connect kindness centers globally while maintaining their essential local character. A new app allowed communities to share resources, experiences, and solutions while preserving the face-to-face interactions that remained at the heart of their philosophy. Marcus had recently celebrated his 70th birthday at the diner, surrounded by 4 generations of both biological and chosen family. The celebration had been broadcast live to kindness centers worldwide, each adding their own cultural traditions to the festivities. Chinese dumplings were served in Seattle, Brazilian feijoada in London, and Moroccan tagine in Sydney, all inspired by the simple act of breaking bread together. As he watched the global celebration unfold, Marcus reflected on how the movement had transcended its origins while staying true to its core principles. Each kindness center maintained its unique identity while being part of a larger tapestry of human connection. The model had proven remarkably resilient, adapting to technological changes and social shifts while preserving the essential human element that made it work. Research universities had established departments dedicated to studying the kindness effect, documenting how these centers of community connection were addressing global challenges like social isolation, economic inequality, and environmental sustainability. The data showed measurable improvements in everything from mental health to local economic resilience in communities with active kindness centers. The movement had even begun to influence global economic policy. The kindness quotient, a measure of a business's positive impact on community well-being, had become an important metric for investors and policymakers. Companies around the world were learning that profit and purpose could coexist, that success could be measured in smiles as well as dollars. Yet amid all this growth and recognition, Johnson's Family Diner remained unchanged in its essence. The coffee was still served in slightly chipped mugs, the vinyl booths still squeaked, and Angela still remembered everyone's usual order. It remained a place where barriers dissolved, where strangers became friends, and where the simple act of sharing a meal could spark extraordinary transformations. One evening, as Marcus helped close up the diner, he found Emma sitting at the counter, writing in a journal. "What are you working on?" he asked, sliding onto the stool beside her. "I'm designing the next evolution of kindness centers," she replied, showing him sketches of spaces that combine traditional community gathering places with innovative solutions for future challenges. "I think the world is going to need them more than ever." Looking at her designs, Marcus saw the future of their movement taking shape. The principles he and Angela had discovered 2 decades ago were being reimagined for new generations, new challenges, and new possibilities. The simple truth that had transformed his life continued to evolve and grow, touching lives in ways he could never have imagined on that rainy night so many years ago. As they locked up the diner, the neon sign casting its familiar glow onto the street, Marcus felt a profound sense of contentment. The story that had begun with a broken-down car and a cup of coffee had become a global narrative of hope and transformation. But more importantly, it remained a deeply personal story, lived out every day in countless small acts of kindness and connection. The future would bring new challenges and opportunities, but the fundamental truth remained unchanged, that the greatest transformations begin with simple acts of kindness, and that true wealth lies not in what we possess, but in how we touch the lives of others. As Marcus walked home through the vibrant streets of the community he had helped nurture, he knew that the next chapter of their story was already being written, one cup of coffee, one conversation, one connection at a time. As Marcus walked through those vibrant streets that evening, he could never have predicted how the next chapter would unfold. The following morning brought an unexpected visitor to Johnson's Family Diner. A young tech entrepreneur named Sophia Chun, whose autonomous vehicle had ironically malfunctioned right outside the diner, much like Marcus's Bentley had decades ago. Sophia, with her cutting-edge augmented reality glasses and quantum-powered smartphone, seemed almost comically out of place in the intentionally preserved atmosphere of the diner. Yet, as Angela served her the same life-changing cup of coffee that had once transformed Marcus, something remarkable began to take shape. "I've been working on artificial intelligence systems for community development," Sophia explained to Marcus, who had taken his usual seat beside her at the counter. "But something's missing. The algorithms can predict patterns and optimize resources, but they can't capture this." She gestured around the diner, where the morning symphony of human connection was in full swing. Marcus listened as Sophia described her vision of combining the kindness center model with advanced technology in ways that would enhance rather than replace human connection. Her eyes lit up as she talked about using AI to identify communities in need, blockchain to ensure transparent resource distribution, and virtual reality to connect isolated individuals with supported communities. Emma, who had been quietly wiping down tables nearby, joined the conversation. "What if," she suggested, "we could use technology to amplify the ripple effects we already see happening naturally, not to replace face-to-face connections, but to help them reach further?" The conversation that followed lasted well into the afternoon, drawing in other diner regulars, each contributing their unique perspective. Maya brought out her tablet, showing how she'd been using simple data analytics to better serve the community's needs. Mr. Chun, now in his 90s but sharp as ever, spoke about the importance of preserving cultural wisdom in any new iteration of the model. Over the next few months, Johnson's Family Diner became the testing ground for a revolutionary fusion of human-centered community building and cutting-edge technology. Sophia moved her entire research team into a renovated warehouse nearby, where they worked closely with community members to develop what they called the Kindness Intelligence Network. The network didn't replace the essential human elements that made kindness centers work. Instead, it amplified them. When a regular at one center mentioned needing help with childcare, the system could instantly connect them with other community members who had expressed interest in helping. When a small business needed specific expertise, the network could identify someone in the global kindness center community with the right skills. Marcus watched with pride as Emma took a leading role in the project, bringing her unique perspective as someone who had grown up within the kindness center model. She insisted that every technological addition should enhance rather than replace human connection, leading to innovations like connection coins, a community currency that rewarded acts of kindness while tracking their ripple effects through the community. The project attracted attention from unexpected quarters. Space exploration companies began studying the model for future Mars colonies, recognizing that any sustainable human settlement would need strong community bonds to survive. Climate scientists saw potential in using the network to build resilient communities capable of adapting to environmental challenges. Angela, now approaching 80 but still the heart and soul of the diner, took particular joy in seeing how the original spirit of her simple act of kindness had evolved without losing its essence. Technology changes, she would say, but the human heart remains the same. We all need to feel seen, heard, and connected. The diner itself underwent subtle changes while maintaining its core character. Holographic displays showed real-time visualizations of the community's interconnections, looking like constellations of light that grew more complex with each new interaction. The slightly chipped coffee mugs now had embedded sensors that could track the ripple effects of conversations had over coffee, creating beautiful data art that decorated the diner's walls. Sarah's family remained deeply involved, with her grandchildren now taking leading roles in different aspects of the movement. Emma focused on preserving the human element in technological innovation, while her cousin Michael developed programs to help other communities adapt the model to their unique circumstances. One particularly meaningful project emerged when they discovered that isolated elderly individuals in different parts of the world were using the network to form deep friendships and support systems. A grandmother in Tokyo would share tea virtually with a grandfather in Buenos Aires. Their conversations translated in real time, while both participated in their local kindness center's activities. The movement began addressing global challenges in ways its founders could never have imagined. When a natural disaster struck a community in the Philippines, the Kindness Intelligence Network mobilized resources from centers worldwide within hours. When a small town in Norway faced economic collapse after its main industry shut down, the network helped them transition to a new community-based economy. Marcus, now in his mid-70s, found himself learning as much as he was teaching. The young people bringing new ideas to the movement showed him how technology, when guided by compassion and community wisdom, could enhance rather than diminish human connection. One evening, as he sat with Angela watching the sunset through the diner's windows, they reflected on how far their simple idea had come. The holographic display showed thousands of connections forming and strengthening across the globe, each one representing a story of transformation similar to Marcus's own. "You know what amazes me?" Angela said, her voice soft but clear. "All those years ago, when I offered you that cup of coffee, I was just doing what my mother taught me, showing kindness to a stranger. I never imagined it would lead to all this." Marcus smiled, watching as Emma demonstrated the latest community connection technology to a group of visiting diplomats. The diplomats had come to study how the Kindness Center model might help ease tensions in conflict zones, having seen how it had already bridged divides in communities around the world. "That's the beauty of kindness," Marcus replied. "You never know how far it will reach or what form it will take. We just have to trust that every small act matters." The diner hummed with the energy of the evening crowd, local residents sharing meals alongside virtual visitors from around the world, their conversations translated and shared through subtle augmented reality interfaces. The smell of coffee and fresh-baked pie mingled with the soft glow of holographic displays, showing the ever-growing network of connections. As night fell over the city, the diner's neon sign cast its familiar warm glow onto the street, now joined by subtle ribbons of light that showed the paths of community connections. A visual representation of the countless ways lives had been touched and transformed by what had started in this simple place. The story of Johnson's Family Diner continued to evolve, embracing new technologies and facing new challenges while remaining true to its foundational truth: that the greatest transformations begin with simple acts of kindness, and that true wealth lies in the connections we forge with others. As Marcus watched the next generation take the movement in directions he could never have imagined, he knew that the ripple effects of that first cup of coffee would continue to spread, touching lives and transforming communities in ways that were both profoundly simple and simply profound. And so, the legacy of kindness continued to grow, adapting to new times while remaining rooted in the timeless truth that had started it all: that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply seeing another person's humanity and responding with warmth, understanding, and a simple cup of coffee. That timeless truth about kindness continued to evolve in ways that even Marcus and Angela couldn't have predicted. As the world entered the 2050s, the Kindness Intelligence Network had become an integral part of global society. Yet Johnson's Family Diner remained unchanged in its essence, a testament to the enduring power of human connection. Emma, now in her 40s, had become a leading voice in what scholars were calling the human-tech harmony movement. Her work focused on ensuring that advancing technology enhanced rather than replaced genuine human interaction. Under her guidance, the diner became a living laboratory where cutting-edge innovation met timeless wisdom. One morning, as the sun rose over the city skyline, now dotted with vertical gardens and sustainable architecture, a group of students from the newly established World Community Institute gathered at the diner. They had come from every corner of the globe to study what had become known as the Johnson Method, the perfect balance between technological advancement and human connection. The key, Emma explained to them, while her own daughter served coffee in the same slightly chipped mugs that had become a symbol of the movement, is to remember that technology should serve humanity, not the other way around. The diner had incorporated subtle technological enhancements that seemed almost magical. The tables could now generate holographic displays showing the history of conversations that had taken place there, each one a thread in the vast tapestry of human connection that had been woven over the decades. The windows doubled as interactive surfaces, allowing visitors to see real-time connections forming between kindness centers worldwide. Marcus, now in his 80s but still sharp and engaged, had taken to spending his mornings mentoring the next generation of community builders. His white hair and lined face gave him the appearance of a wise elder, which in many ways he had become. The stories he shared of the diner's early days had taken on an almost mythical quality, though he always emphasized that the real magic lay in the simple act of human kindness. "You see that corner booth?" he would tell the students, pointing to what had become known as the transformation booth. "That's where countless lives have changed course. Not because of any technology or program, but because someone took the time to truly listen, to truly care." The global network of kindness centers had evolved into something far more sophisticated than its founders had imagined. Using quantum computing and advanced AI, the network could now predict where community support would be most needed and mobilize resources preemptively. Yet at its heart, it still operated on the same principle that had started it all: the power of human connection. Angela's daughter Maya, now running the day-to-day operations of the original diner, had developed a unique approach to preserving its authentic character while embracing new possibilities. The coffee was still brewed the old-fashioned way, but now the beans were sourced through a global cooperative of sustainable farmers connected through the Kindness Network. The menu remained simple and comforting, though now it could adapt in real time to accommodate dietary restrictions and preferences without losing its home-style charm. One of the most remarkable developments came through what became known as the memory walls. Using advanced neural interface technology, Visitors could experience firsthand the emotional impact of pivotal moments in the diner's history. They could feel the uncertainty Marcus felt on that first rainy night, the warmth of Angela's welcome, the gradual transformation that had changed not just one life, but countless others. The diner had also become a hub for what researchers called empathy enhancement, a revolutionary approach to using technology to deepen human understanding and connection. Through subtle ambient computing and biofeedback systems, the space itself could adjust to promote more meaningful interactions between people, creating an environment optimal for genuine connection. Sarah's great-grandchildren now played among the regulars, their laughter mixing with the soft hum of quantum processors and the traditional clinking of coffee cups. They represented the fourth generation to be shaped by the principles that had transformed their great-uncle's life, each adding their own interpretation to the legacy. One particularly innovative project, spearheaded by Emma's daughter Luna, focused on using immersive technology to help people understand the long-term impact of their acts of kindness. Visitors could now see how a simple gesture, a warm welcome, a listening ear, a helping hand, could create ripples that affected lives for generations to come. It's like watching the butterfly effect in real time, Luna explained to a group of visiting scientists. But instead of chaos theory, we're mapping the mathematics of kindness. The movement had begun addressing challenges that would have seemed insurmountable in its early days. Climate refugees found not just shelter, but community through the network of kindness centers. Interplanetary colonies based their social structures on the Johnson method, recognizing that human connection would be crucial for survival in harsh environments. On the diner's 75th anniversary, a global celebration connected millions of people across Earth and its first Mars colonies. The holographic displays showed an intricate web of connections spanning not just continents but planets, each line representing a story of transformation that could be traced back to the principles first demonstrated in this humble establishment. Marcus, watching the celebration from his familiar spot at the counter, felt a profound sense of continuity. The diner had become both a living museum and a laboratory for the future, preserving the essential truth about human connection while continually finding new ways to express and enhance it. "You know what's remarkable?" he said to Emma, who had joined him with her own cup of coffee. "All the technology, all the advances, and still the most powerful moment here is when one person truly sees another, truly listens, truly cares." Emma nodded, watching as her daughter Luna used gesture controls to adjust the ambient systems, fine-tuning the environment to support a group therapy session taking place in the corner. That's why we've survived while other social innovations have come and gone. We never forgot that technology is just a tool. The real power lies in human hearts connecting. The diner had become a place where past and future merged seamlessly, where ancient wisdom about human connection met cutting-edge innovation in service of that same eternal truth. Quantum computers might power the networks that connected kindness centers across the solar system, but the real transformation still happened one human interaction at a time. As the evening light filtered through the smart glass windows, casting patterns that seemed to dance with the holographic displays, Marcus reflected on how far they had come from that first rainy night. The world had changed in ways he could never have imagined, but the essential truth remained, that the greatest power for transformation lay not in technology or wealth, but in the simple act of one human being reaching out to another in kindness. The diner's neon sign still cast its warm glow onto the street, now accompanied by subtle bioluminescent accents that responded to the emotions of passers-by. Inside, the rhythm of human connection continued as it had for decades. Conversations shared over coffee, strangers becoming friends, lives being transformed one small act of kindness at a time. And so, as humanity reached for the stars, the legacy of Johnson's family diner continued to evolve and grow, remaining always true to its founding principle, that in a world of endless change, the simple power of human kindness remains the most transformative force of all.